Hello, everybody. Continuing on with chapter 6 of my book, which is about this chapter is about war with aliens, War of the Worlds. What would a war with UFO, UAPs look like? And why would we have one at all? So, anything truly alien will have an alien motivation or would be likely to have alien motivations, and maybe there's overlap. So it might be a war or something that appears to be a war for no apparent reason that we can ever discern, or it might be something very familiar. Now understand that anything life, any form of life, even an AI, is made by a life form at some point, right? Um, Goes through evolutionary pressures, goes through mutations as a form of reproduction and propagation. So that would kind of tend to indicate that a life form from another planet would share something with us, and an advanced life form that has advanced technology and went to the bother of coming from there to here, whether it's 10 light years away or 10,000 light years away, I mean, exhibits behavior that human beings do. We explore, we spread out, we populate. We had to claw our way up the evolutionary ladder, which at every level is littered with the bones of those that quite didn't make it. All right. So, we've established that if you want commonly valued resources, minerals, chemicals, water, organic compounds, space, mass, just rock for cement or whatever, that the outer solar system contains that. Now let's look at living space. It would be a stretch to imagine that, organic creatures, let's say from 500 light years away from a completely different star system, let's say they have a different type of star and a different type of planet, that they could just move on to our planet easily. There'd be all kinds of obstacles to that. Not just them infecting us, but our planet infecting them, like the original novel of the War of the Worlds, right? So, if they got here, they could use the materials in the solar system to make things like rotating O'Neill cylinders and donut shaped toruses and things like that, and power it with fusion or catch energy from the sun or whatnot. And they could, again, create millions of these habitats if they have the means and motivation to, let's say, take apart the asteroid belt, use it for raw materials, scoop hydrogen and other gases out of Jupiter, um, extract water and all these things from different moons of Jupiter. They have plenty of space, and they could live in an environment conducive to them. All right, and they may have crossed the light years in a craft, which is basically a space station, with a drive, an engine, and the ability to protect itself as it goes through outer space, and of course direct its movement. So, we're talking orbital habitats and things like that. They could make plenty of them. So, invading the Earth for space, less likely. Less likely. And the greater their technology, the less likely it is. Now, what is here on this planet that is unique to this planet and that would be desirable? First of all, the life forms on Earth would be novel to them, right? And, if DNA based life is something that just inevitably happens, if carbon based life is like that, there is a possibility that they may be able to transplant some Earth life onto their habitats and adapt them, genetically engineer them, or whatever, and keep them as food, keep them as pets. They could do the same with us, or just study them for novelty. We study all kinds of animals and all kinds of aspects of animals on this planet, and it's hard to tell what drives some of this, but it's just like that. Science is like that. Science explores everything. And if they have curiosity, which again, going up the evolutionary ladder, curiosity and the need to learn new information and utilize it may be a survival trait across the universe. There's no reason why it wouldn't be. Okay? So there's that. There is the uniqueness of the biome and the biota on Earth. Then there is novelty of information, novelty in general, and cultural products. So, for example, religion. Any number of religions have all kinds of stories behind them and history behind them, and there's things that obviously couldn't be true on a level of reality. There are cultural truths that may be specific to a culture or are shared across cultures, and this may be so new to them that they could easily occupy 1,000 years trying to understand it and decipher it, right? That's something. That's something we need to think about. I've always said things like folk songs, portraits, a telenovela, a handmade meal, or a martial arts form, a kato or a taolu, you know, could be just amazingly valuable to them because of its novelty, because of its differences. It may teach them new things, not only about us, but them. And so they may decide that we need to take over this planet and set up a presence here and study this or enjoy this or whatever. I had a conversation decades ago with Jeff Dunn. He was the son of Brenda Dunn, who ran the Pear Lab in Princeton University. I was a volunteer there, and they investigated things like micro PK and remote perception. And at one point there was an online conversation about alien abductions and things like that. And Brenda put forth the view that, well, what is really going on? I refuse to believe that any study could last that long. And Jeff echoed that. And Jeff can be a bit of a putz sometimes, so I didn't like interacting with him online. So about a year later, we met in person, and I said, Jeff, you're parroting, you're echoing what your mom said. You're kind of assuming that her assumptions are what's happening. Maybe it's not a study. Maybe it's the alien equivalent of cow tipping. Maybe it's a game they play. Maybe they're harvesting things for food. Maybe they just like the feel of us when they touch us. There's a million reasons why a sentient being could act that way. Just because it looks to us like a scientific study. And bear in mind, you have a science background. I have a science background. Okay? We have science degrees. So everything can look like a study to us. Right? So we have to make assumptions to theorize, and we have to test our theories, but we also have to test our assumptions. We don't want to be slaves to them. And we also have to realize that assumptions are not facts. Conjecture is not fact. That's how we look for facts. All right? But I want to say this about an alien war. Okay, we're going to expound more in later sections. Total destruction of us as a race, as a species, even as a planet, is fairly easy. Let's start with our defense. What kind of a defense do we have against something coming from space? We don't have much. We barely have anything. Yes, we can launch some surface to air missiles, but that predicates that they actually get to our atmosphere. All right, we don't really have a reliable attack rocket. Like an anti-ballistic missile. Again, we're operating mostly within the Earth's atmosphere, or kind of a low Earth orbit, right? We don't have anything capable of blasting anything coming, let's say around the orbit of Mars inward. We can't reach there. We can barely reach the moon with single shot rockets. The Apollo program was incredibly expensive and labor and time intensive and things like that. And we're having all kinds of trouble with SpaceX and Artemis and things like that. So we can barely sense what's coming in. We have some orbital telescopes and some satellites, but I wouldn't rely on them. If these UFOs and UAPs come as a fleet with the flight characteristics they have in space, with a low profile, low heat signature, no exhaust, um, there might be thousands of them and we wouldn't be able to see them, especially if they know where our satellites are, where our orbiting telescopes are, and things like that. Okay? So our sensory, our reconnaissance is non existent. Our attack capability, counterattack capability, is virtually non existent. All right? So that alone, even if they're coming with technology not that much better than ours, that alone is a disadvantage because the high ground is the advantage ground, and space is the ultimate high ground. Okay, the projectiles, they're projectiles they could have, which even if it's conventional, just add that level of speed and power to it. Their fire and maneuver capability is way superior to anything we have. I think I mentioned that before, but it bears repeating. Now, what kind of weapons could they use from space? Believe it or not, one of the deadliest things they have is rocks. Okay, they could simply drop rocks on us, asteroids. They could just take apart, I don't know, Phobos and Deimos, Mars's moons. I'm probably pronouncing the second one wrong. Just take it apart into rocks and just chuck it at high speed. Chuck it at UAP speeds or higher. All right? Devastate us. I want to talk about two impacts, asteroidal type and meteor type impacts, and the effect they had on the Earth. Sometime around 60 million years ago, I think it's called Chicxulub, but again, my Mexican isn't that great. My Spanish was estimated to be about 6.2 miles in diameter, traveling at 12 miles a second, or 43,200 miles per hour. I think that's the figure. Unless it was 432,000. There's a little ambiguity here with the zero. And that devastated the Earth, wiped out the dinosaurs, wiped out all the non-avian dinosaurs, wiped out anything big, devastated large plesiosaurs and things like that, and set the stage for the rise of the mammals, right? If that had never happened, there's no indications the mammals would have wiped out the dinosaurs or outcompeted them. All right, so that's just one. Now imagine three of these, four strategically placed equal distances along the Earth's orbit. What could that do? There's nothing we could do about it. Now let's talk about a smaller weapon. Tunguska in Russia, in Siberia, the Tunguska event. This was, I think, a little bit before World War II, if I'm not mistaken, maybe in the 20s or 30s. It's estimated to be 120 to 160 feet wide in diameter and traveled at about 60,000 miles per hour, and it had an air burst 3 to 6 miles above the surface. It knocked over, like tore and knocked over 80 million trees over 830 square miles. And we don't know what it was. It could have been a rock or like a ball of ice and rock, like a comet. We're not sure what it was. Think about that for a moment. Think about that. And on top of that, let's say they wanted to just wipe life out on this planet once and for all. Well, then you have something called a relativistic kill missile. It could be a baseball sized rock traveling at relativistic speeds. Doesn't even have to be traveling like 90% of the speed of light. It could be at like 1% or, a very low number, but fast enough that time dilation occurs. They could launch it from within the solar system or without, and just calculate how long it would take, and it would hit our planet and just devastate the life on it. If you hit two, so they hit it opposite sides of the planet, I don't think there's any chance that anything larger than a virus would survive, or a bacterium. Okay, so another way they could do this is what's called an X-ray laser, which in theory you could kind of put stuff in orbit around a star like ours and channel its energy and launch out X-rays, which a big enough X-ray burst over a long enough time could cause the star to go supernova. Whoa. And then another way is I've heard of making a Death Star, which is again put stuff in orbit around a star and manipulate its magnetic field and cause it to emit jets of plasma and radiation. And again, that would travel to another star and or a planet and wipe out life. Okay. So, and then it goes without mentioning that an alien starship traveling at relativistic speeds or anything close to it, crashing onto our planet, would be devastating. Okay, think of like the fictional Star Trek Enterprise, right? If Star Trek Enterprise was traveling below the speed of light, let's say at 2% the speed of light, if something that big crashed into our atmosphere, even though it would burn up in the atmosphere, unless you kept your deflectors on, your mythical deflectors, that kinetic energy would cause a deadly wave. It would be probably on the level of what killed the dinosaurs, if not more. Probably more because of its velocity, right? It's nothing to laugh at. Now, I'm going to close this section, and we're going to talk about something I call the Shepard-Uchkin orbital dart system, which I think is something aliens could use, something like that, but I think it's something that is going to be used on this planet. So we'll have a little fun with that.